This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast with me, Matt Addison. After a whirlwind couple of days in the transfer market at the back end of last week, Liverpool have strengthened their squad significantly with the arrival of both Thiago Alcantara and Diogo Jota. We've spoken extensively about Thiago and Jota over the last few days, and if you haven't caught up with all of that content, do feel free to take a look back wherever you got this show from. I can promise you there's plenty of good stuff to get into. For this episode of the show, though, I'm delighted to have Alex Dicken from the Birmingham Mail alongside me to talk in depth about Diogo Jota. First of all, Alex, thanks for joining me, and how are you getting on?
No worries, really well, thanks. Obviously got a game tonight as well, so seems a good time to get obviously some of Jota's thoughts out there, but also hopefully a bit of Ki-Jana Hoever as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Some interesting questions to be asked both ways, I think, for Liverpool. It's certainly an interesting deal, and we'll get straight into the Diogo Jota stuff, obviously. Lots of excitement about Thiago. But how excited should Liverpool fans be about their other signing, if you like?
Really, in terms of, potentially ceiling's absolutely massive. He's over the last 3 years been one of probably the top three most important players in Wolves' rise, I think, overall. He was massive in the Championship, scored 17 goals. For me, he was just brilliant that year, probably only behind Ruben Neves. And then obviously he took a little while to get going in the Premier League. He didn't score for the first 3 or 4 months of the campaign, but then once he did, he just completely took off in 2018-19. I think he scored 10 goals over the final 23 games or something like that. So he was a massive reason with Wolves getting into Europe in their first season back, and he was brilliant, really. And to be fair, I think Wolves were kind of lucky to hang on to him that summer. I think we thought there'd be more interest, but obviously the move to Liverpool's come out. Now, he wasn't as good last season, that has to be said. I think there was towards the end of the season, he dropped out of the Wolves team, and probably looking at it now, it looks quite a good deal for both parties. I think Jota gets a fresh start somewhere else, obviously a top Premier League club, and Wolves get a decent fee. But if he gets anything near the level he's shown at Wolves in some of his performance over the last 3 years, Liverpool could have one hell of a player on their hands.
What do you think his best position is, and how do you sort of see him fitting into this Liverpool team? Because we know Liverpool have got plenty of options. I suppose the question is, where does he get into that starting 11?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Liverpool game against Chelsea on Sunday, and I was just absolutely in awe of Sadio Mane, as I always am. He's just an incredible player, but I think that is the position where Jota will potentially hope to get minutes if he can. He's primarily played off the left for Wolves in a 3-4-3 formation, but Wolves have flirted with a 3-5-2 system quite a lot over the last couple of seasons, especially. And when Wolves played that, Jota was probably at his best. That system suited him best when he was a second striker alongside Raul Jimenez. Obviously, having watched Liverpool under Klopp, they don't seem to play with two up front. It always seems to be a 4-3-3 formation. So I'd imagine it's going to be off the left. I don't think he's never really played off the right for Wolves. He's played obviously down the middle, but not so much in a 3. He did it towards the end of the Championship winning season. After Leo Bonatini, the striker Wolves had at the time, fell out of form. Jota went into the middle, playing as more of a false 9. But I think in that system, Liverpool played definitely off the left.
What would you say his sort of key attributes are for sort of people to watch out for over the next few months?
I think just the way he plays football, it's unique in a way because he's so kind of, high energy. His intensities are, 100% all the time. A massive kind of confidence player as well. I think when things go well for him, everything comes off. He doesn't really have, you see Sadio Mane and Salah, they've got great feet, really fast feet in tight spaces. He's not really like that. He tends to just kind of run through people. He's very, very strong, very fast over the first 10 yards and gets away from people. And he's more of an instinctive player than anything else. You'll never see Jota go one-on-one and roll a ball into a corner. He just blasts it first chance he gets, and sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. I think he's best when he doesn't have time to think. Sometimes when he has time to think and he gets one-on-one, we saw it so many times last season where he was obviously lacking in confidence and he'd kind of run into the goalkeeper and he knew it was coming every single time. He just kind of run into him and obviously the chance would go. But in terms of his qualities, definitely the way he plays football is he's spoken a lot in the past about being kind of the underdog and how it suits him, sort of thing. And and the way he plays football, sometimes it doesn't very much look like an underdog. It looks like kind of a big kid against a bunch of children on a playground because he just bullies teams. I remember the game against Arsenal in 2018-19 toward the end of the season. Wolves won 3-1 with 3-0 up at half time, and Jota was absolutely incredible. He just ran riot, destroyed them. And again, there's been a lot of games like that, which is, I think there's an element of that Jota hasn't been very good over the last year for Wolves. But again, in that year, there's been games where he's just been absolutely breathtaking. I mean, as a Wolves reporter, he's obviously done player ratings, whatever, every week. I've never given anyone a 10 as much as I've given Jota. He's probably at about 5 or 6. He's been that good in some of the games. But again, he does have moments where he's not very good. He's either he's very much brilliant or average. That's kind of what he's been. But if he can, become consistent at Liverpool, there's no reason why he can't become a top Premier League player.
Is there anybody out there who Liverpool fans might think of as being a little bit more well-known that you could say he's sort of a similar player to stylistically, or is he just one of those players that, a little bit like Roberto Firmino, he's just a bit unique and there isn't really anybody obvious?
I don't really want to draw a comparison because obviously Luis Suarez is held in a kind of highest esteem by Liverpool fans. But when you watch Suarez play and the way he kind of somehow finds a way, wriggles a way through people, he always did at Liverpool, kind of rather than go round them, and he just tend to go straight through. And often it'd just go through his legs or, whatever, or it'd bounce back to him, stuff like that. And that's kind of the way Jota plays. Doesn't really look to go round people. He just goes straight for them, goes straight through them. And that low centre of gravity just kind of upsets defenders. He's obviously nowhere near what Suarez has achieved as a player, obviously. But I think in terms of playing style, the way Jota plays and tends to just kind of dribble uniquely with the ball, it's similar to Suarez in the way he used to do it for Liverpool.
And Adama Traore, of course, another Wolves player who plays probably on the opposite side, very much a dribbler as well. I mean, he's reportedly valued, from what I've read, about twice as much, or certainly close to twice as much as what Liverpool have played for Jota. I mean, why would your sort of stance be on that? Because when both players are at their best, I've heard people sort of argue between the two as to who is the better one, but the valuations seem to be a little bit far apart.
I think a lot of it comes down to goals. Jota has always offered more goals to Wolves than Adama has. But in terms of their, the last 12 months, last season, you couldn't compare them. Jota was a player who, played one game well every, 5 or 6, whereas Adama was for about 4 or 5 months absolutely unplayable. Probably Wolves player of the season before the lockdown period. So I think the way Adama is, obviously everyone knows the qualities he's got. He's unique in the sense that nobody can compete with him in a foot race. His feet are absolutely incredible. He's so strong, and if Adama added goals to his game and scored, 15 goals a season, we'd probably talk about a £100 million player rather than a £70 million player. But in terms of the way Wolves play and how good Adama has been over the last 12 months, I think the valuations are probably about right. I think Adama's got the potential I think Adama's still got a much, much higher ceiling than Jota. I think when Adama eventually does become available, it's probably going to, be to a Barcelona or Real Madrid.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's probably fair to say then that, with Jota, it's more about that consistency, isn't it? It's finding that top level of the game that he does have, but on a consistent basis. So, as you say, a sort of 40-odd million pound deal seems maybe about right in the current market. Yeah,
I think so. And the structure of the deal was interesting, obviously. With it coming in instalments first and foremost. I think that I was kind of umming and ahhing over the weekend as to whether who'd got the better deal of it. And I think it all really depends on Jota. And the thing is with Jota, he's so unpredictable that you really can't know. If he goes on to become the consistent player that Liverpool hope he can be, and you see the performances at Anfield that we've seen, 1 in 4 or 5 games over the last year, then Liverpool have got an absolutely incredible player on their hands. But at the same time, if he doesn't kind of forget the last 12 months and go on again and kick on again and progress, then Wolves have probably got a very good deal, and will think they've cashed out at the right time.
We've seen a lot of fanfare for Thiago, as I've said, over the last couple of days, and understandably so, given the calibre of player that he is. But I suppose in terms of squad depth and that sort of thing, in terms of Liverpool being able to be spoken about in the same way as other rivals at the top end of the table, I suppose signing someone like Jota, he is very much, at the very least, an exceptional squad player for Liverpool, even if he doesn't get into the first team. Would that be a kind of fair assessment?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at the teams Liverpool are competing with, I don't think there's anyone that can say Liverpool's front three isn't the best in the league. I think that's kind of a given now. But in terms of beyond that, Liverpool have never really had that much. I know Shaqiri went as a kind of a backup player and has tailed off over the last season or whatever. But Origi's done well in flashes. But I think Jota kind of raises the bar a little bit. Because if you look at Jota, I think every other Premier League team, when he's on form, maybe not Man City, but I think the others, he'd probably get into their starting 11s. So I think it's a hugely exciting signing from a Liverpool point of view. And because, obviously the wealth of Liverpool and the players they've got, it's probably not even that much of a risk at 40 million or whatever, 40 odd million. So I think it's a good deal for all parties. And I think if Jota over the last 6 months especially has looked like he needed a change of scenery. So if he can kind of rediscover the form that he showed in his first 2 seasons at Wolves, and then kick on, obviously he's just become a Portugal international as well and scored his first goal recently. So I don't see any reason why he couldn't eventually kind of take over from Mane or Salah whenever they move on.
I think it was 22 combined goals and assists last season, and you're saying there that maybe wasn't his best form. I suppose we've seen a lot of comparisons really with Jota's last season at Wolves and Sadio Mane's last season at Southampton. If you look at the underlying numbers and that sort of thing, they do appear to be quite similar. And you mentioned there that you think potentially that once Sadio Mane moves on, Jota could move into one of those positions. Is that how highly people at Wolves rate him?
Yeah, definitely. I think I don't think people at Wolves will remember the Jota of the last 6 months. They'll remember the Jota who was brilliant in the Championship and he was absolutely brilliant over the last 6 months of their first season in the Premier League, when he was over that kind of 6 month period he was Wolves' best player. He was absolutely fantastic, and unfortunately he couldn't carry it on into the last season. I know he obviously got a lot of goals and goal contributions, but I think I think he scored in 10 of 48 games overall. He's a very, very streaky player. Like when he gets on a run, he's very difficult to stop. But he also went a long, long time without goals, like 11, 12 games at a time without goals. So it's just whether he can find the consistency. That's the big question with Jota. If he can find the consistency and deliver, post those numbers, post 10 more or whatever a season, Liverpool have got a great player on the hands. But I do think long term, the Liverpool front three are all kind of late 20s now, aren't they? So Jota at 23, I think he's got a hell of a lot of football already under his belt and at a decent level. Obviously, he's played Champions League with Porto before he came to Wolves, been around Atletico Madrid, played in the Europa League at Wolves. So I think over the next 2-3 years, if he can develop, I don't see any reason why when the time comes for Liverpool to go into their own new cycle and they need a new front three, that Jota can't become a starter in that team.
Yeah, and a final question on Jota then. I saw over the weekend he sent a message to Wolves fans thanking them for his time there. Does he leave the club then in sort of a good rapport and on good terms with the Wolves fans? Massively,
yeah. I think, as I said, every Wolves fan will remember what Jota's done. They'll remember the games against Arsenal, the FA Cup semi-final where Wolves lost against Watford. He was absolutely incredible. They'll remember the hat-tricks against Leicester, against Besiktas, against Espanyol in the Europa League last season. Jota has been an absolutely incredible player for Wolves. There's no getting away from that. He's been brilliant. A truly, truly brilliant player. And what was great for me was to see that, when players leave clubs and move on to bigger things and whatever, sometimes a selling club doesn't kind of make a big deal out of it. They'll just kind of post a story and say, yeah, Jota's gone to Liverpool, great. But Wolves made a massive thing about it. They had loads of videos and kind of really paying tribute to what an excellent servant Jota has been. It's been 3 years, but he'll be really, really, really fondly remembered at Molineux for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish off then, a quick word on Ki-Jana Hoever, obviously moved for a deal that could rise to 13.5 million, going the other way, a separate deal to the Jota one, but obviously the two players swapping clubs. I'm sure you've heard a fair bit about him, and I suppose you must be excited because he's a player that could make a difference for Wolves.
Yeah, he's someone I personally kept a little eye on after because he made his debut at Wolves, didn't he, in the FA Cup. And I remember reading your own coverage on the Liverpool Echo about it and stuff. And he's a really interesting player because Wolves have got this kind of philosophy of signing players that are late teens, early 20s, and blending them with experience. And hopefully these players, in 4 or 5 years' time, like Jota, will be obviously worth a lot more and developed a lot more. And Hoever, yeah, he seems perfect to what Wolves need at the moment. They don't need him to come in and be a guaranteed starter. They've got players for that. They're about to sign Nelson Semedo from Barcelona as well, so he'll be the starter at right wing back. But yeah, if they've got such a small squad and that's the way they operate, that players like Hoever and other younger players in the squad will definitely get minutes over the course of a season. So it's a really exciting signing, and it's a kind of trademark Wolves sign, but obviously we've seen the kind of reaction from Liverpool fans as well, and a lot of Liverpool fans seem quite annoyed that he's been let go. So that can only bode well, I suppose, for Wolves. So yeah, it seems a really, really decent little bit of business, and hopefully he'll kind of develop more rapidly because he'll get more first team exposure here.
Yeah, I think it was a slight surprise for Liverpool that they let him go, but I suppose that is it, isn't it? It's that quicker route to the first team. And you mentioned there Nelson Semedo potentially coming in. Do you think Wolves are buying Ki-Jana Hoever as a right wing back, or do you think potentially he could be part of that back three that we've seen, obviously with a former Liverpool player in Conor Coady in there as well?
Yeah, the thing Wolves have tried to over the last 2 years now, sign a new centre back who can play alongside Willy Boly and Conor Coady on the right side of the back three. So it does seem like Hoever could potentially, change between those two positions as a right side centre back and a right wing back, and Wolves need him to play there as well. But Wolves have got a few options at right wing back. I guess at the moment he'll probably be fourth choice centre back. So if one player is injured or for whatever reason can't play, he'll be straight into the team. So it's a great opportunity for him. But I think it could potentially, if he develops as Wolves hope he will, solve a long-term issue Wolves have had at centre back. So if in 2-3 years' time he could be on a level of a Willy Boly or a Conor Coady, then he could potentially slot in alongside them, and that would solve a long-term issue. So it's a really exciting sign, and one that I think everyone's kind of looking forward from a Liverpool perspective as well, to seeing how he actually does and how he fares in the Premier League on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic move for him, and I'm sure everyone at Liverpool will wish him, all the best at Wolves. So we will obviously continue to track how he does, and potentially have a conversation with yourself in 12 months' time if he's made it right into that senior team. So yeah, we will see what goes on, of course. We're recording this podcast actually just before Manchester City take on Wolves on Monday night. So I'm sure Diogo Jota will be hoping his former teammates can do Liverpool a little bit of a favour, even this early in the season. You will, of course, know the result of that match by the time you're listening to this show. Either way, though, it's set to be an exciting season for Liverpool, and the signings of Thiago and Jota have only added to that feeling. Thanks very much to Alex Dicken of the Birmingham Mail for joining me. Hopefully that's whetted your appetite even more to see Jota play in a Liverpool shirt. The Liverpool.com podcast is to come later today, but until next time here on the Blood Red channel, it's goodbye for now.